Hi, my name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about something I wrote about recently, which is how, like, as a backend engineer, the pretty much need to communicate like schema changes to the front end and how we do it. So, if you work in an engineering team, either as a product designer, manager, front end engineer, back end, or maybe you interface with any of the engineering team at all in any way, shape, or form, right? One of the bottlenecks of building, especially in startups, is as much as we always try, we don't. Well, maybe shouldn't generalize, but I don't always have the picture like totally perfect. And what that means is that if I work on some set of endpoints and the user story communicated is achieved with those endpoints, with the logic in those endpoints, I consider it a win and I pass it on to the front end. Now, in passing it on to the front end, most of the times there are a few like communication change that need to happen. Maybe you need to change stuff, you need to capture something you're not capturing or something, or you want to understand why you're using a particular type for like a key rather than what they anticipated it was going to be. Um, so those normal like communication chain things. Then when those endpoints get integrated, right, we consider it a win. Sometimes we build the product, we push it to like a pilot user or some users that already have in our system. If you're quite lucky as a startup to already have users, and the next thing that we get is feedback, which are very actionable, very important because they come from users. And what that means for like engineering team, product engineers, engineers in general, product owners is the idea of what you built may not necessarily capture everything that the user really experiencing, like the pains, what they would like, or stuff like that. So let's assume, for the case of for the case of this example, let's assume you're must say like an inventory system, right? Trying to help SMEs capture like stock levels and changes in stock level. Now, ideally, when you think about it, what should come to your mind is a way to change stock level very similarly to the way we do stuff with Excel. How you keep use Excel to keep stock of your inventory. You could easily see all the cells and change it. So something very like very unique and dramatic like Excel. But a lot of the time, what we end up doing, or what like a junior me would most likely do, would I would think about it in a single thing kind of manner. So in a single thing, I'm taking just one row, or taking one item, changing the item, and I'm updating it. I'm not thinking of how to do like a combination of updates at the same time. Now, what this means is that um, if you are if you take that kind of a product to like a user, it gets the job done because you can update like an item, a row, stuff like that. But what becomes actionable, or what kind of feedback you should expect is, I would like to impute more than one like inventory at a time. That sounds crazy, but is ideally the way I assume someone who's really busy taking inventory would want to operate. I would like to update like on an admin level. I would like to like let's say operate like delete inventories that are exhausted or stuff, like, just something weird like that, right? For the sake of the story. Now, I have to also like remember that we've already implemented a single thing. So now the challenge is we need to convert the object that's been passed as a request payload to an array of objects. Now the challenge with communicating this change, right, to like the front end is it's easy to assume that because of this nothing is going to change. Just put it in an array, and you can just tell them like I put it in an array, The challenge with this is if you work in a team that actually builds according to a schema, so schemas that you have in like your Swagger doc, your redoc, or even like Postman, like those schemas, right? They would actually go and check what you've done. So let's assume we've converted it to an array of objects and stuff like that, and we added a few extra keys. Um, what that means is we need to communicate these changes to the front end. Now, ideally, what most people do is we work in isolation, which is ideal because backend front end except your full stack, and then we push to the environment and alert the team. Okay, the front end team have done this, so the web guys go do this. The mobile guys, if mobile, we need to update this, right? Now, the challenge with this mobile is a bit tricky. Maybe some other time. Um, the challenge with this is majority of the time when front end you inform like the front end team, at least in my experience, that's very important, is they say they hear, or they say they've listened, they say they've heard you, but they don't really hear you, and it's not their fault. Most of the times there's always something to attend to. There's always something like that's more paramount on their table, so they listen to you, but they don't like hear what you're really communicating half the time, or they think they do. And most of the time we always circle back and how can we do this, how can we do that. And if you're me, like sometimes it's tiring because I mean the same way they have tasks is the same way we backend engineers also have tasks most of majority of the time. And I don't think if I was a front engineer I would like to circle back a lot of time to ask like, hey, how does this work, these changes you've made, how does it work? So I guess it's something similar at work. experienced it a lot, like over the course of my career. But I faced something similar at work, and um, the team decided that we needed to figure out a way to solve it, right? And in that doing, there were a few things that I implemented, and I'm going to discuss them. It's very simple to be honest. So I use Fast API, so most of my schemas are tied to Pydantic, and if they were not Pydantic and I was using Fast API, they'll most likely be like Python data classes. Um, that's very important because that gives you like a base foundation of how like my approach works. And the reason why I'm saying this is because in I'm a Python guy, so if you're going to implement this for say like Flask or Django REST, you most likely need to, I don't know, for Flask you might have to do some stuff with the blueprints, I guess. That for Django REST you most likely need to do something similar for six serializers. So here's what I did, right? The very most important thing is to keep track of all the schemas in the entire application. So it depends on the structure. This implementation depends on your structure. So most people like, if you've played around with Django, you most likely know that Django is like MVT, model view templates, and the way that works is you have like models, you have like reviews. Reviews is very similar to your controllers. Uh, yeah, then you have like templates. But if you're using the API version, you have like it's more like model views than maybe routes rather. So similarly, but the file structure in Django is you have like a file, a directory, then you have like the models, the views, and the rest of those things. And you can have the same thing with like micro frameworks like Flask and Fast API, where you have your you can have your schemas, you can have your models, you can have your like your I'll call them routes, um, like living separate scripts within the same directory. So when you have like a tree like structure like that, it's easy to like implement a solution for that. They also like architectures where you have all the schemas together, all the database levels, all the database actions and ORMs together. They have all the routes related actions together. So it depends on how like your code is pretty much set up. And similarly in places like JavaScript and like maybe Java, so your file structure affects the way you attempt to collate all the schemas. So the first step I think is really obvious is that you're trying to collate the schemas and the file structure, like I said. affect how that works. Then the next thing is you want to keep track, or you want to load all the previous schemas you have. So you want to get um all the already saved schema changes in the past and compare. So when you compare now, if there are differences on the key level, value level, key level, value level, you actually you make the switches based on those. So there are many changes that could happen now. You could have like a key value, a key modified, a key removed, or a key added. So what that means is you could have, like, let's say, let's assume for the case of this illustration, you have a model that you consider like user, where you have the email, you have the password, and you have the name. Now a modified schema like that will be an addition, or let's say phone number. A That's like modified, like, well, that's not modified, that's like you're adding something to it. A Like altered in terms of removing stuff is, I could remove, like, let's say the password, and you just be like, oh, what for like logging in. So all I save is the name and the email. And we could have one where we added a key also into the structure, where, which is like the phone number I spoke about earlier. um the next thing that you then do is think of how you communicate these changes. So what I did in my case was I created like a beautiful text, and and I sent it to Slack, right? So I had to build the message based on the changes. And one other thing that I also did, which is like a final step, is I then updated the saved schema changes. So what this means is that as you're building and working, right, you could make whatever changes you want to make, and when you're ready to push to like your on environment, there needs to be able to communicate it. Now, how do you do that? Basically, for me, I actually just implemented like a somewhat like a GitHub action thing. No, no, that's not true. I implemented like a pre-commit hook, that kind of thing, where every time I do like I attempt to like a git add, basically it does all the checks I have, maybe like this, like LinkedIn, and then it generates like the schemas, tries to compare the schemas and see if the latest changes in the branch is equal to what we have before. If it's equal to what we have before, it doesn't generate a message for Slack. If it's different, it generates a message for Slack, sends it, and then pushes to the environment. Now, it's also possible to use like a GitHub Actions. Using a GitHub action is also like it work the same way. The difference is, instead of actually generating the Slack message in, let's say, your like local environment, you generate it in like a GitHub action or GitLab action, and then you send it to wherever you want to send it to. One of the other things that I think I was interested in exploring before I stopped was publishing the changes. So you could decide to publish the changes to like a Git. So GitHub has this pages thing. I don't know what it's called right now, but you could generate, like, convert the messages into like a blog post, which can then be sent to Slack. That this is the link for the latest changes as of today, stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much like how I would that's pretty much how I now like keep 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 track of changes in schemas for like the front end. Yep.